Gangsters surround a shepherd woman, but what they don't know is that kung fu masters hide in the shadows, and within seconds they're taken down. The wide-open plains of southern Wyoming baked under the blaze of the midday sun. The sky was clear, bright blue, but the air was heavy with dust and tension. The pounding of horse hooves on dry earth rolled across the land like war drums. At the heart of a trail of sheep, running in perfect rhythm, rode a woman, mysterious, wrapped in deep blue hide stitched into uneven garments, cinched with a rough belt and rawhide-tied boots. She looked like she'd stepped straight out of some forgotten age, half legend, half shadow. Rope in hand, she guided the flock with almost choreographed precision. The sheep moved like they were an extension of her will. She never glanced back, not out of fear, but because she didn't have to. Behind her, 5 riders closed in, rough men armed with curved machetes, iron rods and war cries that had shut plenty of mouths before. But not hers. At their lead was the meanest of them all, Duke Rawlins, warlord of the Crimson Barrel Gang. A ragged mohawk cut across his sweat-slick skull. His bare chest carried old scars and prison ink. His dark, hollow eyes were hungry for blood. He didn't know her name, didn't care. All he knew was what he'd heard. Some lone shepherd woman was guarding land the cartel used for their gun-running routes near the Utah border. And worse, his men were vanishing, quietly, without a trace. This afternoon, Duke wanted answers, or her head. "Close the flanks," he barked, spurring his horse hard. "She ain't slipping past that choke point." Up ahead, the valley pinched into a narrow pass. 2 barren hills formed a natural corridor, a perfect trap, or so they thought. The sheep, lined up with almost military order, began to funnel through. The woman moved among them, graceful, measured, but that was just the prelude. When the 5 riders thundered into the stone throat of the pass, everything shifted. The air grew thick, the hoofbeats dulled like the world itself held its breath. From the cliffs above, 3 figures dropped into view, faceless, hooded, clad head to toe in black. Silent, shadow-made flesh, and in less than 10 seconds, hell broke loose. One horse buckled, throat struck in a clean, crushing blow. Its rider flew like a rag doll, crumpling after a precise kick to the chest. Another tried to swing, but a perfectly timed sweep flipped him mid-air before he slammed into the dirt, lights out. A third opened his mouth to shout and choked on a sharp strike to the throat. The movements were terrifyingly exact. No rage, no wasted motion, just pure efficiency, pure kung fu. Duke Rawlins was still mounted when the presence came up behind him. He reached for steel, too slow. A driving elbow snapped his collarbone, pitching him from the saddle like trash tossed over a shoulder. When his vision cleared, she was already there, standing over him. The sheep circled like stone silent witnesses, guardians of the scene. She stepped closer. Her eyes, steady and unshaken, carried no anger, just a force that couldn't be broken, a line that wouldn't be crossed. "Tell your boss there's no room for fear here," she said, voice like iron. "Even the quietest pasture runs deep, and its guardians don't sleep." Duke, gasping in the dirt, looked at his men, every last one down. He'd survived countless fights, but this wasn't a fight. It was an execution. From high on the ridge, hidden in the rocks, an old man watched in silence. One eye blind beneath a frayed cloth, a wooden staff carved with Shaolin symbols tucked beneath his arm. He didn't speak, but pride lingered on his weathered face. As the woman vanished back into the hills, flock at her side and shadows at her back, he whispered, "She's ready." The war, silent, invisible, had only just begun. A slow wind drifted across the southern Wyoming hills, carrying the dry scent of sun-burned grass. Down in a valley, no one bothered to map, stood a lonely property. No signs, no easy roads, no prying eyes. Here lived Reverend Eliza, a woman of quiet ways and eyes that saw far past appearances. The locals called her the Shepherd of the Blue Sheep, half respect, half superstition. She spoke little, preached only to small circles, and favored silent sunrise gatherings in open fields, her flock grazing close by. But beneath that gentle image lay something far stronger than wool and prayer. Her wooden farmhouse looked plain from the outside. But inside, floors were reinforced, tatami mats lay beneath worn rugs, and shelves carried texts on Eastern philosophy alongside hand-drawn maps tying backcountry routes to forgotten strongholds. The barn, big, weathered, set apart, hid more than tools and grain. It was where 3 refugee masters gathered, the last of a nearly extinct line. Master Meihan, the elder, with his white beard to his chest and his blind eye covered by cloth, leaned always on his carved Shaolin staff. Beside him, quick and quiet, Shun Wei, small in frame but sharp as lightning, and Ming Yao, the youngest, calm, disciplined, yet eyes hard as stone. Together they lived in shadows, training unseen, remnants of temples the world had once tried to erase. Their bond with Eliza had begun years earlier, forged in fire. Long before she was Reverend, Eliza had worked as a field medic in conflict zones across Central Asia. In 2009, during a humanitarian mission, she was captured by a militia and dragged to a hidden mountain village. There she saw a temple burned and monks slaughtered for practicing an ancient form of kung fu that blended body and spirit. Risking her life, she smuggled out 3 survivors, the very men who now lived under her roof. 2 years in hiding hardened her. They taught her not just how to fight, but how to listen, not just to endure, but to vanish. When the time came to flee west, it was Eliza who mapped their escape, and Eliza who gave up her own land in America as their haven. Since then, the ranch was no home. It was a fortress, a sanctuary, and Eliza had gone from student to something more, guardian of their new temple. But the outside world was shifting, with gun-running routes heating up between Utah, Nevada, and Wyoming. Gangs carved up the countryside federal patrols had forgotten. The cruelest of them all was Crimson Barrel, led by Duke Rawlins, a disgraced mercenary once tossed out of Afghanistan for excessive force against civilians. Rootless and ruthless, Duke rebuilt himself as a warlord, running his racket with ex-cons, dishonored soldiers, and local cutthroats. They seized ranches, extorted farmers, and ruled with fear. And that was about to bring them face to face with the shepherd of the Blue Sheep. For a while, Eliza's ranch slipped under the radar. It was low-key, nothing flashy, no signs of wealth. But once stories started circulating, armed men disappearing there, pickup trucks found overturned with the occupants knocked out or with broken limbs, the gang's curiosity turned into pure rage. "You actually believe those folk tales?" Lester, the second-in-command, asked one night while he sharpened a dagger. "I don't believe in witches," Duke scoffed, "but every time I hear about them, somebody loses their head." He'd already sent 3 teams to intimidate the shepherd. None came back. Every trail ran out in the same place, near a dry hollow and 2 scrub hills, the same narrow pass they'd tried to trap her in that day. At the ranch, Meihan watched the distant mountains. "She's ready," he said under his breath, as Ming Yao practiced forms with a wooden sword. "Ready for what?" Shunwei asked, measured. "To be seen," the master answered. "And when she's seen, the world will have to pick a side." Inside, Eliza tended the flock. Her eyes were calm, but even at rest, her body hummed with readiness. Her faith had never been passive. She believed in peace, but she also knew that peace sometimes has to be defended with your fists, and she was far from alone. The sky over Cheyenne felt heavy that late afternoon. Dark clouds knotted the horizon, and a warm wind threaded through the hills like a whisper of something coming. Around Reverend Eliza's place, birds had gone quiet early, and even the neighborhood dogs were on edge. At the center of the ranch, Eliza tightened the wooden fence fastenings with firm hands. Her sheep rested in a half-moon around her, arranged like pieces on a battle board. Even silent, the flock felt alert, soldiers waiting for orders. The masters had paused their training. Mei-Han squinted at the skyline. Something was coming. And this time, it wouldn't be just 5 riders. In town, Duke Rawlins paced. The humiliation in the valley had spread among his men. He needed an answer, not just for his rep, but for his control. "Let's do it like Columbia," he said, shoving a rural map across the table. "No approach, no warning. We cut power, move through the brush and leave nothing, not even the wool." Lester eyed him, doubtful. What if she's got more of those ghosts? Duke didn't answer right away. He pulled an intelligence sheet stamped with the name Eliza Monroe. It was a file stuffed with partial military records, scrubbed documents, NGO ties, and deployments to war zones. "This is just the shell. No one's cracked the inside. But I know the type who erases her past. She's not a civilian, not a pacifist." The plan was simple. Move at dusk with 2 teams. One would cross the eastern hill with a line of sight to the barn and house. The other would sweep the north trail, mapping ambush points with drones. They didn't know the drones would be useless. In the cabin, Shun Wei set up a small altar of dry leaves and hand-drawn symbols. Ming Yao hefted 2 training swords, testing his balance on a single plank suspended by ropes. Mei-Han stood statue still, listening to wind sounds. None of them spoke. Eliza sat at a table and wrote a note in plain, steady handwriting. "If anyone finds this, know that I fought for every sheep, every silence, and every corner where peace still clings." She left it on the altar, tightened the blue bands of her garments, and stepped out the door like someone leaving the gate of a temple. As night fell, the power went dead, just as planned. The ranch sank into absolute black, save for the stars. Duke's men moved in silent, 14 in all, heavy gear, night vision, radios clipped to their vests. They crossed the fields carefully, not realizing they were being watched. 60 meters away, hidden beneath the earth in camouflage chambers, the masters lay in wait. A network of tunnels and concealed rooms had been dug over 2 years for this very moment. They emerged with no weapons, no lights, only the memory of what they'd learned. The first team was cut off trying to sever the fence wires. A short noise, 3 muffled cries, then silence. The second team pushed into the barn, expecting cattle, and instead found emptiness. A curtain of hay fell on them, followed by controlled kicks, punches, and takedowns. Duke, watching from an armored truck at a distance, only realized the disaster when radios started dropping one by one. "Damn it! They're dropping like flies!" he roared. "They knew!" Lester shouted. "They were waiting!" From the ridge, Eliza walked into the moonlight. Dressed in blue, the wind flicking her clothes, she moved to the field center. The sheep closed around her like a living wall. "Rawlins!" her voice rang out. "Take what's left of your men and go. We don't wage war for power here. We plant silence." Duke climbed out of the truck, furious, shotgun in his hands. He fired. He missed. He fired again. Something struck his hand. A stone, a blade he didn't know, and the gun clattered out of his grip. He dropped to his knees. Then he saw the 3 figures behind her, the same black silhouettes from the ridge, utterly still. Duke tried to rise, but the sound he heard wasn't footsteps. It was a drum, not real, not external, but inside his skull, as if his own body acknowledged defeat. He stumbled back to the vehicle, didn't speak, didn't look back. By morning, the whole town knew. The Crimson Barrel had pulled back, and the shepherd remained untouched. The next day, the ranch fell silent again. But that silence was different, tense, like the ground itself was on alert. The invaders' bodies had been carried back to the roadside under cover of night, none dead, all with clean fractures, surgical wounds, and a note tied to their clothes with twine. "Go back and tell what you saw, or don't come back." Crimson Barrel had been bruised. It still breathed, but Duke Rawlins wasn't the kind to accept no, especially from a woman, and especially not so publicly. As he nursed his pride out of a hideout in an abandoned refinery south of Casper, other eyes began to turn toward the mysterious shepherd of Wyoming. That same day, a newcomer rolled into Cheyenne almost unnoticed. Alan Booker, an investigative agent from DHS, arrived on a quiet mission to trace a string of reports about unidentified paramilitary activity on rural properties along interstate borders. The reports traced from Nevada through Utah into Wyoming, the same pattern: armed groups disappearing, equipment abandoned, rumors of ghost figures guarding a reclusive shepherd. Booker, skeptical and seasoned in covert ops, didn't buy legends. He believed in logistics, and the pattern was too consistent to ignore. With a stubbled jaw, a tired blazer, and a small case of files, he rented a jeep and started threading the outskirts of town. He wasn't interested in the shepherd's faith. He wanted to know what or who she protected. He had no idea he was about to touch a much larger board. Back with Crimson Barrel, Duke's failure cracked the crew. Lester began meeting in secret with two others, Mickey Schatz and Gomez, cartel veterans with international contacts. "Old man's losing it," Lester said. "First the woman drops our men with 3 ghosts, then he runs. That's not the Duke we know." "The cartel won't stand for this weakness. They want results," Gomez replied. "Maybe new leadership." A quiet mutiny started to form, but they knew toppling Duke would take something massive, something to shatter his authority for good. What would do that? Capture the woman or unmask whoever stood behind her. At the ranch, the tension was thick enough to cut. Eliza rose before dawn, spending her days split between training, tending the land, and poring over handwritten reports from an invisible network of former comrades. People who'd also gone off the grid. Mayhan could see the toll it was taking. "She's gearing up for something," he said one night, watching her from a distance. "She knows they'll come sooner or later," Ming Yao answered. "But that's not what troubles her." "It's the choice," Shunwei added. "When the time comes to cross that line, from defending to striking first." Eliza didn't want war, but she couldn't remain a shadow forever. With each clash, her name spread further, morphing into legend. And with legend came fear, but also curiosity. At DHS headquarters in Washington, an urgent report landed on the Special Ops Director's desk. A field agent had intercepted encrypted comms between Crimson Barrel members and traffickers along the Mexican border. One name kept coming up: the Blue Woman has monks, not normal, real kung fu. We're sending an elite squad to shut it down. If that intel held water, a new strike was coming. Faster, sharper, deadlier. Time was running against Eliza, and she knew it. One silent night she walked up the hill where Mayhan meditated. They stood side by side for long minutes, no words. Then she broke the quiet. "When it starts, I won't be able to stop." Eyes closed, he replied, "Then make sure it starts for something worth finishing." The wind turned north that afternoon, cold, heavy with low clouds and bad omens. Eliza felt it in her bones, the same kind of wind that blew on the day her unit was ambushed in the Asian mountains, the same metallic tang in the air, the same silence before the fall. From the barn roof, Ming Yao finished stringing a web of tiny bells tied to nylon thread among the trees. An old Shaolin alarm system, silent to strangers, clear as a siren to the trained ear. Miles away, 3 black pickups rolled to a stop on a dirt road. Men climbed out. No insignias, no open comms, 2 carried long cases, precision sniper rifles. A third wore frequency-jamming headgear. They weren't Crimson Barrel, they were something else. In command, Tobias Creed, a former Black Ops agent turned merc for hire, the guy corporations, militias and crooked politicians called to handle sensitive problems. Who hired him didn't matter. The job was clear: capture the so-called Blue Shepherd, alive if possible, dead if not. Meanwhile, in downtown Cheyenne, Alan Booker pushed deeper into his investigation. He already knew something about the ranch was off. Satellite images showed movement patterns no ordinary flock could make. Informants whispered about unreported disappearances, and Booker knew how to read the silence that settles over things nobody wants in the daylight. Then he found something no one else had: Eliza Monroe's real name. Eliza Zhang, daughter of a Chinese father and American mother. She'd been listed as KIA in 2011 during an ambush in Afghanistan, but someone had helped her vanish and be reborn under a new identity. Booker printed the records and stared at her old photo. Same eyes, different look. That woman was no civilian. Back at the ranch, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the bells trembled. Shun Wei looked up first, then Ming Yao. Meihan didn't move. He already knew. Eliza dropped the rope she'd been using to feed the sheep and stepped onto the porch. "We're being surrounded," Shun said. "Not gang muscle," Ming added. "Professionals." Eliza closed her eyes for a heartbeat. When she opened them, they were stone cold. "No ambush this time," she said. "Tonight, the war comes with a name and a uniform." The 3 masters nodded and slipped into the fields. This wasn't concealment, it was a warning. Tobias Creed gave the signal. One sniper locked onto the barn roof. He fired. Nothing. The bullet rang off a hidden steel plate Meihan had placed there 2 years earlier, preparing for the day that must not be named. From inside, 3 dark figures burst through the high window, shadows gliding into the night. They closed the distance to the shooters in seconds. One dropped to a strike at the neck. Another was disarmed before he even realized he was under attack. The third simply vanished into the black. Creed pulled back to his vehicle, scrambling to regroup. He dialed his handler, someone watching from Washington. Alan Booker answered. "I know who she is," Booker said tightly, "and you need to stand down." "Too late for that," Creed shot back. "What, are you on her side?" Silence. "I'm on the side of the truth," Booker said, "and if you don't pull out now, you'll see what she can do, with empty hands." At that moment, Eliza appeared in the pasture, alone, walking straight toward the invaders. No weapons, no fear. Creed ordered fire. Nothing happened. His men couldn't move. One by one, they were dismantled in the dark by the masters, soundless, unstoppable. Eliza stopped 2 feet from him. "Who sent you?" Tobias stared, and for the first time in years, felt fear. Not of what she was, of what she stood for. "You shouldn't exist," he muttered. "Then tell that to the ghosts." She brushed his face with 2 fingers, not threat, but compassion. Then turned away. Tobias collapsed to his knees. The op was finished. And now, in Washington, someone knew the truth had slipped the leash. The turning point wasn't just the new enemies arriving, it was that, for the first time, Eliza had been seen by the real world. 2 days after the failed raid, Eliza's ranch looked unchanged. Sheep grazed. The barn's paint still peeled. Nylon cords swayed gently in the wind. But beneath the surface, the defenses had shifted. They no longer lived in silence. They lived knowing they were being watched. The name Eliza Monroe was now tucked into classified files across 3 agencies. Not headlines, not yet. But analysts and strategists who had never heard of a shepherd in the Wyoming hills were now whispering her name. Alan Booker stayed in the region, on vacation officially, but in truth, sending coded reports to the only superior he trusted. His mission now wasn't to expose Eliza. It was to understand how she had lived invisible for so long. Booker wasn't naive. He knew that sending a full dossier on her would mean handing over her location to groups even more ruthless than Tobias Creed. But something in him resisted. Something that grew every time he remembered her eyes, steady in the chaos, compassionate even when facing an armed enemy. Meanwhile, Duke Rawlins, crushed by failure and whispers of betrayal inside his own ranks, vanished. Some said he'd run to Nevada. Others swore his own crew had taken him out. The truth was far less dramatic. He was regrouping, quietly, planning something bigger. Lester, now the de facto leader of Crimson Barrel, chose a different angle. He spun Eliza's legend not as a threat, but as fuel. You heard about her, right? The woman who dropped soldiers with her bare hands. He'd say in backroom bars and hush-hush meetings with potential allies. Yeah, she's real, and she's daring us. If you want to watch the world burn, follow me. On the other end, contacts across state lines started to listen. The story of the Blue Woman and her ghosts spread like wildfire. At the ranch, Eliza could feel the net tightening. The war won't come head-on, Shunwei said, sharpening a blade he'd never use. It'll come through words, through the stories they tell about us. We're turning into a symbol, Ming Yao added, and that's more dangerous than any weapon. Eliza listened in silence. Then she climbed to the highest point of the property where Mei Han sat meditating, his back to the valley. It's starting, she told him, but not the way we expected. The old master opened his eyes, unsurprised. It was inevitable. The world needs villains, and when villains have faces, heroes need one too. She sat beside him. The grass was cold. The wind carried voices from afar. Not gunfire, not footsteps, words, whispers spreading, comments on obscure forums, blurry videos posted anonymously. The Blue Woman, the three monks, the farm of the impossible. It was slipping out of their control. And then a letter arrived. No sender, handwritten, sealed with a drop of black wax. We know who you are. We know who protects you, and we know what you left behind. It's time to return to the war you started. You know which one. Eliza read it once, then burned it. But inside, something lit up. That evening, she gathered the three masters. They sat on the porch, surrounded by the faint chime of bells in the wind and the sheep settling down for the night. They're trying to drag me back, she said. Back to a past I buried with too many dead. Maybe it's not a return, Meihan replied. Maybe it's the ending you never had. She breathed deep, closed her eyes for a moment, then stood. Then I need to finish what I started. For the first time, the three masters said nothing. The choice was no longer about defense. It was about stepping into the light, and Eliza knew to truly protect this place, she could no longer hide. On the third day after the letter, Eliza woke before dawn. The sky was still a dark smear above the horizon as she climbed to the ranch's highest ridge. There, where the wind howled strongest and the world felt distant, she knelt. She didn't pray. She just listened. There was no more doubt. They were being pushed out of the shadows. For years, protecting the flock and keeping the masters off the radar had been enough. Now, it wasn't strategy. It was illusion. Drones would return. Armed squads would be replaced with better trained, better armed ones. The legend of the Blue Woman and her monks was becoming myth, and myths sooner or later become targets. Eliza walked back down the hill with a decision she never voiced. That morning, training was different. For the first time, she took the center of the improvised barn dojo. Shunwei watched in silence. Ming Yao mirrored her movements flawlessly. Meihan observed from the shadows. "You're taking the center," the old master said after half an hour of sharp, precise forms. "Not as a disciple, but as an equal. Eliza didn't answer. Her body spoke for her. She wasn't following orders anymore. She was setting the pace. After training, she dismantled the old passive defenses, the wires, the bells, the thorns, all gone. In their place, she started building something new, an entrance. A space meant not to repel, but to welcome. "You're making us visible," Ming Yao said. "No longer invisible," Eliza corrected. "We'll show who we are. No permission needed." That afternoon she rode into town. For the first time since it all began, she entered Cheyenne in broad daylight, dressed in blue, face uncovered. She bought supplies, dropped off a donation box at a rural school, and walked quietly into the meeting hall of the public library. Alan Booker saw her come in. His body stiffened. He knew who she was. She knew who he was. But in front of everyone, she simply said, "I need help organizing a community meeting." "About what?" the receptionist asked. "Rural security and truth." The woman jotted it down, missing the tension thick in the air. Booker approached slowly. "You're putting yourself out there. About time. This will attract more than just curiosity. It'll draw out the people who want you gone." Eliza met his eyes. "Then everyone should see me before they try to erase me." Outside, Lester was unloading heavy weapons in an abandoned warehouse. His new allies carried accents from across the border, and the crates bore faded stencils of old armies. "The legend stepping into the open," one smuggler said. "That's good." "For who?" Lester asked. "For anyone who wants to turn her into a martyr." Lester stayed quiet. He was beginning to realize this wasn't a war against a woman anymore. It was against what she represented: real resistance, quiet courage, power without arrogance. Meanwhile, Eliza reshaped the ranch for something greater. Not just defense, but refuge. Visitors began arriving, quietly, women escaping abuse, men who'd left gangs, young drifters who'd heard whispers of the shepherd who took down soldiers with her hands. And she welcomed them, not with weapons, with discipline, with work, with truth. The masters passed on what they could to these new faces, not to build an army, but to form people who could stand tall. Eliza was no longer just a figurehead. She was a bridge, the center. "You're building a temple," Mehan said one afternoon. "No," Eliza replied, "I'm planting roots." And roots, she knew, could make even the fiercest storm hesitate. Low clouds spread over the Wyoming sky like a heavy cloak. The ranch was busier than ever, yet no louder. Every step was measured, every glance was sharp, every movement carried the weight of knowing the decisive moment was close. Eliza woke before first light, her body already moving before her eyes even opened. The newcomers at the ranch, those who had arrived seeking protection, redemption, or direction, now lived by strict routines. They plowed the fields, trained under the master's watch, and read in silence as dusk settled. This wasn't a boot camp. It was a place to rebuild human beings. Ming Yao taught long staff forms. Shunwei drilled breathing techniques and rope-based defense. Mehan stayed in the shadows, observing. He only stepped in when balance was lost, or when someone tried to force strength before precision. Meanwhile, outside that sanctuary, the net was closing. The name Eliza Monroe, now attached to unofficial files, civilian reports, and blurry images, had landed on the desks of three very different groups. A consortium of private militias who saw her as a threat to the established order. A network of border informants who tagged her as a subversive asset. And a faction inside DHS who didn't just see a woman, but a dangerous symbol. Rumors that she had built a spiritual armed sanctuary spread through underground forums, fringe social networks, and even the halls of Washington. It no longer mattered who she was. What mattered was what she was becoming. Alan Booker, still in Cheyenne, fielded urgent calls. You don't get it, Booker. If she isn't silenced, this turns into a movement. Maybe it already has, he said, staring at a printed copy of a letter from one of the ranch's refugees. This is bad for everyone. Maybe only for those who live off fear. Across the state, Lester planned his final move. He no longer trusted street thugs. Instead, he hired ex-military contractors, counter-terror specialists, to launch a strike, fast, clean, with armed drones, ground infiltration, and signal jammers. No one in, no one out. And no survivors, Lester said, eyes locked on a digital map. You'll kill women and kids, one mercenary muttered. No, I'll kill a myth before it turns into a religion. At the ranch, Eliza gathered her leaders. They'll come with everything, she said bluntly. And this time they won't hold back, Shun answered. The question isn't whether we survive. The question is, what do we leave behind if we fall? In silence, Mei Han handed her an old scroll, the Shaolin Code, translated by hand. At the bottom, one line stood out, "He who dies in balance does not disappear, he transforms." Eliza understood. This wasn't about winning, it was about holding center when the world collapsed around them. The night before the assault, though unconfirmed, everyone knew it was coming. The entire ranch gathered around a fire. There was no fear, only acceptance and focus. She spoke little, only this. If we've made it here, it's because something brought us, not weakness, but searching. Tomorrow is not about fighting, it's about truth. If we are to be seen, let us be seen fully. By morning, the nylon thread bells rattled again, not from wind. From the sound of war approaching, the sky was grey, cloudless. The silence that draped over the ranch was unnatural, the kind that breaks before the storm. At 4:13 a.m., the first signal came. A recon drone swept the northern field. Silent, but spotted. 3 minutes later, sensors picked up 8 diesel trucks, camouflaged, unmarked. They came from both sides of the valley, just like before, except this time they came to kill. Lester monitored everything from a military tablet inside an armored truck. Behind him, mercs prepped rifles, flashbangs, gas. Their plan was simple: surround the barn, cut off exits, and drop anything that breathed. She's not walking out of this, Lester growled. At the ranch, Eliza was already ready. Blue clothes fitted tight, boots anchored. The masters stood positioned. Civilians sheltered in the underground galleries built for this day. She wouldn't run, not this time. What's the plan? Ming Yao asked. Not to win, Eliza answered. To mark every second of what they do here, so the world sees who they are and who we were. Hidden cameras lit up. The ranch became a box of truth. Every step, every invader, every blast streamed to an encrypted server. Eliza had learned from her enemies. Visibility was shield. At 4:47, the first shots tore through the windows. Tear gas hit the barn, but the masters were ready. They channeled the wind itself, venting the gas outward. Precise, practiced. 2 squads breached from the south side. Shunwei intercepted. In 30 seconds, 4 men lay on the ground, not dead, but broken, unable to go on. He vanished back into the dark before the rest realized what happened. In the main field, Ming Yao faced 6 at once. He never stopped moving. He didn't fight with anger. He fought with rhythm, every strike like a chord. Low kicks, sharp elbows, disarms using his opponent's own weight. When the last dropped, he glanced at Eliza across the field and nodded. Lester watched, rage rising. Impossible, he snarled. No, a mercenary muttered. That's elite training. They're not elite, they're ghosts. Lester yanked the trigger for his final card, a drone carrying an incendiary warhead. If he couldn't take the ranch, he'd burn it. The drone climbed, soared over the ridges, dipped toward the house. Eliza stared at it, felt the heat, the vibration in the air, and then something shifted. From the eastern ridge, a figure appeared. Alan Booker, with a long rifle, no digital scope. One shot. The drone exploded mid-air. The flash lit the whole field. Lester staggered back, stunned. Who the hell was that? Eliza looked up, saw Booker raise a hand, then vanish into the trees. She smiled. For the first time in a long while, the battle wasn't over, but the symbol had already won. The mercenaries, seeing their drone destroyed and half their force neutralized without fatalities, began to retreat. The legend of the Blue Woman was no longer legend. It had become too real to fight. Lester tried to flee, but when he slid into his truck, she was already there, sitting in the back seat. "You don't get any of this," she said. "You gonna kill me?" "No." "You gonna let me run?" She met his eyes. "I'll let you decide what to do with what you've seen." He stepped out, dropped his gun, and left. The ranch, scarred but standing, still breathed. The three masters gathered with Eliza at the center of the field. The breeze carried through. The sheep, silent, re-emerged. Eliza was different now, no longer just the shepherd guarded by shadows. She was the shadow and the light. For 2 days after the attack, the ranch stayed silent. No celebration, no mourning, just rebuilding. Fences mended, windows replaced, blast marks buried under fresh earth. Residents moved with quiet purpose, as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Eliza walked the fields with steady steps. Her body carried cuts and bruises, her gaze heavier. But nothing about her posture suggested weakness. People from the county began to appear. A farmer dropped off hay. A group of young volunteers brought wood and tools. The librarian brought books. A teacher asked to bring her students, and no one asked questions. The legend had stopped being a tale. It had become a silent landmark. Alan Booker stayed a few more days. In a makeshift cabin, he lent his hands to chores and observed. He drafted his final report titled, "Not a Threat, a Living Memory of What We've Forgotten to Be." Recommendation, no intervention. Recommendation, study and respect. The report was never sent. On his last morning, Booker approached Eliza on the porch. "They'll hunt you again." "I know, and it'll be worse. It'll be truer." He hesitated. "You'll stay here as long as it makes sense, and when it doesn't, I'll be somewhere else with the same purpose." Booker looked at her. For the first time in his career, he didn't see a subject of interest. He saw someone who had found her center and become a center for others. He left without saying goodbye. He knew the circle had closed. The masters returned to quiet routine. The flock grew. The story spread underground. Believers came. Skeptics stayed away. But everyone knew one thing. There on a Wyoming hill, a woman with no weapons had faced soldiers. And won. Months later, a 10-year-old girl arrived at the ranch, brought by a silent woman who never said where they came from. Eliza greeted her with a nod. The girl said nothing, just pulled a faded blue ribbon from her pocket and placed it in Eliza's hand. Eliza tied it around her wrist. On the ridge, Mayhan watched with narrowed eyes, as if recognizing a cycle beginning again. New roots were taking hold, and the ghosts remained, alive where no one else bothered to look. This is a story about silent courage, unshakable faith, and strength not measured by noise, but by standing firm when everyone expects you to fall. If this story moved you, drop a comment below. Tell us what struck you most, what you would have done in Eliza's place, or which part hit you hardest. And don't forget, there are plenty more stories like this on our channel. Watch the others. Share them with someone who loves a powerful tale, and keep walking with us through stories that stir, inspire, and surprise.